4 o'clock hour from the Des Moines Register. Travis Hines, he covers like a blanket Iowa State many things. The Cyclones, and of course, football spring is wrapped up and now headed towards media days eventually in July in Frisco. Travis, thank you very much. You're on with Craig and Paul, David Smoak as well. I want to start with not a random question, but what were your thoughts when you saw where Hunter Dekkers was going to get a shot with the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I think, it has been a little bit anticipated that he'd get a shot. When he was at Iowa Western Community College, which is just about an hour and a half, 2 hours west of Des Moines, the NFL scouts were a pretty regular fixture. And I think they saw a big arm. They saw a kid who had a promising, if not great, first year as a starter at Iowa State before the gambling investigation derailed his NCAA career. So I'm not surprised, but obviously he's got a uphill battle. But a guy with a ton of physical tools, probably had a shot to be a professional baseball player with that big left arm. I think he was hitting low 90s in high school. So obviously a really talented athlete. Now it's a different deal when you're in NFL camp, having played community college last season. But he's got a chance.
Travis, playing the what-if game, what would have happened if Dekkers had not gotten involved in that? You had Beck still there. Would Beck have still won the starting job, in your opinion, or how do you see that having shaken out had things been different?
Dekkers would have been the week one starter in, what would that have been, 2023? I think there would have been a competition because Hunter had a nice first year as a starter, but threw a lot of interceptions, threw a lot of pick six. If you'll remember back to that 2023 year, Iowa State started out, I believe, 1-2. Is that better with Hunter Dekkers? And if it is, does he stay the starter? I mean, it's a real sliding doors moment because obviously he's in this NFL camp. He has tools, hadn't really put it all together at Iowa State and never really got a chance to, because of some of his own mistakes. But now you have, for Iowa State's side, Rocco Becht, the guy they feel like is an all Big 12 player who still has 2 years of eligibility left. I think they're pretty happy with the fact that they have Rocco Becht. I think I don't know that they would have traded that for all the heartache of the gambling scandal from a couple years ago, but I don't know that they could have come out the other side much better than they have, at least, certainly from the quarterback position.
Is this team as steady Eddie as it can be, given the fact they lost their top two wide receivers who are, everybody that plays wide receiver is now in Houston. I'm sure they're sharing a place. But are they as steady Eddies as they can be?
They think that they're pretty well set up. And what they would say, the Iowa State staff, is, yes, Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins were awesome for them. But if you look back over the entirety of Campbell's career at Iowa State, they've had guys going back to Alan Lazard, Hakeem Butler, Xavier Hutchinson, who's with the Houston Texans. They've had a lot of success at wide receiver, and they feel really good about being able to evaluate, develop, and then deploy guys in a way that maximizes their talent. And they got a couple of transfers in Xavier Townsend and Chase Sowell that they feel really good about. I would hesitate a little bit just to say it's plug and play, but when you look at the track record, I think you got to give Iowa State and Matt Campbell the benefit of the doubt that they know what they're doing with that position, both in terms of the evaluation and the utilization, because it's been pretty high level now going on a decade with those positions.
Travis, you had an article, it's been it was last week, about the word or the theme for Iowa State football was toughness. That's what I've thought about who they were. I don't know if it's more mentally or physically discipline, what Matt Campbell brings to the table. What is the specific word of toughness? Anything different than what we thought before?
I think the biggest thing for Iowa State is they lost a number of their high-level leaders. I'm talking about guys like Bo Freeler, J.R. Singleton, Darian Porter, guys that had really come up the hard way, guys that had endured injury, guys like in Jalen Knoll and Bo Freeler's position that were 2-year captains at Iowa State, which is a pretty rare occurrence in Ames, and guys that had paid their way and paid their dues, that had earned success, that had earned leadership positions. Iowa State still has some guys like that on this roster, but not in the number and probably not with the credentials of those guys. So when I think of toughness, I think it's about Iowa State jumping into the season, which, again, they have a week 0 game in Dublin, Ireland, against a Big 12 opponent who happens to probably be their biggest rival in the league in Kansas State. that like they got to be ready to go from day one, and they've got to be able to deal with adversity, going across the ocean, then coming back 2 weeks later. They've got Iowa at home, and then they have a road game in Jonesboro, Arkansas against Arkansas State. Like those first 4 games are really going to test Iowa State. And I think the toughness part comes in certainly mentally, but then physically too. Like there's going to be a price to pay in those first games for Iowa State. Can they battle through that, sustain through that, and come out the other side? Maybe not 4-0, but they got to feel like 3-1 is putting you in a good position. Anything less than that, and you're probably having a hard time digging out of that hole, especially if that includes a league loss before you even get to September.
Travis, so what's been sort of the response and kind of, in your opinion, just knowing Iowa State far better, what's the root of the matter? Jamie Pollard's comments about revenue sharing and NIL and all those things from a couple of weeks ago made a lot of headlines because you had the, oh my God, Iowa State's going to not have athletics anymore kind of a thing. But what's the root of the reality of what he had to say, and what did you take away from that?
I mean, I think the reality is Iowa State's athletic budget has hovered somewhere around $110, $115 million. And all of that is revenue coming in and then being spent out. And now if you're going to take $20 million as part of the revenue sharing off of that, like they've got a $20 million hole that they've got to fill. You can't cut spending as quick as you'd have to at Iowa State by 15, 20% to get to that $20 million spot. That's just not feasible. And in other situations, I think states and Board of Regents are helping to fill those gaps. That has not been the case here in Iowa, where less money has been flowing to higher education from the state level. So like there is an issue financially for Iowa State. But on the flip side of that, there has been an issue financially at Iowa State forever. And I would say that is in terms of keeping up with the Joneses, like in terms of keeping their financial house in order and not being in debt and having these serious outlays. Iowa State's in great shape. But the reality is they don't have a robust, billionaire donor base. I think they wish they had the oil up here that you guys have down there. That might be helpful in that regard. But they do have serious financial issues in the new landscape of college football and in college sports. But again, like I don't know that that's anything different that it's ever been, and certainly not in the last 15 years. Since I think the major wave, that first major wave of realignment that kind of I think positioned us to where we are as a sport kicked off. That they're fighting an uphill battle, and if it becomes the Big Ten and SEC against everybody else, Iowa State's not super well positioned to be able to compete with the way things are, at least financially, because you look on the field. Even in this NIL transfer portal era, the football program has really been as good as it's ever been over a long period of time. The men's basketball program crawled out of a 2-22 hole in 2021 to have gone to 2 Sweet 16s, made 4 straight NCAA tournaments under TJ Otzelberger. And the women's basketball program is recruiting at a really high level and winning at a high level with some of the best players that the program has ever had. So on the field, things are great. I think the problem is you look over the horizon a little bit and you see that those issues that everybody knows about that hasn't totally overwhelmed the athletic department are still going to be out there.
Travis Hines with us on Iowa State football. I didn't know this. I didn't realize this because of what I think of Iowa State when it comes to football. But Scotty B, they were 70th in the country last year in rushing offense and 109th in rushing defense. That's not what you expect with anybody, Matt Campbell or not. How do they improve that?
I think offensively, those numbers, they need to be better running the ball without a doubt. But those numbers are probably tilted by the fact of what we just talked about earlier, is that they had 2 NFL wide receivers. They were passing the ball more than they ever had. And they don't have Breece Hall or David Montgomery. Like Carson Hansen and Abu Sama are 2 really good running backs, but I don't know that anybody is projecting them out to be high-level NFL draft picks or even NFL players at this point, like Breece Hall and David Montgomery were. So like they've definitely leaned on the passing attack more than they had previously, and that may change this year with newcomers. Defensively, it's a little bit of the same story when you're talking about the strength of that defense was in its secondary, where you had Bo Freeler, Malik Verdun, Jeremiah Cooper. You had Darian Porter, who was a day 2 NFL draft pick at corner. Jontez Williams, who was probably going to be a preseason all Big 12 pick. Like, that was the strength of their defense. And that's going to change a little bit this year because a lot of those guys are gone. And I don't know that we saw upgrades across the defensive line. It's going to have to be internal. The biggest opportunity for growth for Iowa State defensively is at the linebacker position, because last year, I believe they had 9 different players miss games at that position due to injury. They were literally playing their 10th, 11th, 12th string linebacker at time last year because of injuries. If they can get a little bit of consistency there, like, that is the area that can really help the defense grow from last year into this year.
What is the thing that will derail them, if it does, from competing week 0 to week 12 for the conference title?
I think the answer is the same on both sides of the ball. It's up front. The offensive line took a step forward last year and was among the best of the Matt Campbell era, which is not a high bar to clear, frankly. Like, that has been the position group that has not come along in the way that basically every other position group has under Campbell. They lose their starting left tackle in Jalen Travis, who is now an Indianapolis Colt. They lose their starting center in Jared Hufford, who had been, I think, a 4-year starter. They've lost some guys at the transfer portal, some depth guys. So, like, that will be a work in progress. I do, again, think they took a step forward as a group last year, but that group has to stabilize and it has to be consistent. And defensively, the defensive line basically got no pressure on the quarterback last year. And I think that's a huge adjustment for coordinator John Haycock and Iowa State, because you look back and for, I think it was 8 years, the first 8 years of Matt Campbell's tenure, he had Iowa State's all-time sack leader on the roster. Jaquan Bailey went into Will McDonald, who was a first-round draft pick of the Jets 2 years ago. They were able to pressure the quarterback without really having to resort to blitzing or doing anything exotic. They just had really good edge rushers. They have not had that the last 2 years, and there's nobody that jumps off the page at you in this offseason that's going to be able to fill that void. If they don't find that in the fall and it translates into quarterback pressures on Saturdays, like, that'll be a major issue in my mind for that Iowa State defense.
Travis, we have a few K-State fans that are in the chat, and they are very full of themselves right now based on the questions they want to ask. One of them was, how excited is Iowa State on a scale of 1 to 10 to go to Dublin to lose and have to fly back? Forget that. I just wanted to bring up Bracket Cat. He's got a little bit of sometimes a screw loose, but he's a great, great viewer. What is the excitement for that game? We've had Jamie Pollard. We've also had Gene Taylor. We've had the coaches on. What is the anticipation for that game?
From a fan perspective, it's really high. Like, what I have been telling people, the vibe that I get from it is that it almost feels like an old school bowl game, in that the stakes are high. It's a Big 12 game against two teams that I think are going to go into the season with expectations and hopes of competing for a spot in the league championship game. It's a rivalry game, and it is in across the ocean, to where I think, and Iowa State fans, best I can tell from talking to them, from hearing the amount of tickets being sold, like, thousands of Iowa State fans are going to be in Dublin for that game. It sounds like Kansas State will as well. But it really does feel like an old school bowl game that people are excited about. They're excited to travel. They're excited to see the game. They're excited that it's a week 0 game. So there is a real level of excitement. I think within the football program, maybe less so, just for like the normal boring football coach reasons. You start a week early. You got to go across 5 or 6 time zones or whatever it is. And then you got to come back and play South Dakota that Saturday in Ames. So I don't know that they're super excited about it. Like, obviously they love the opportunity and the exposure they'll get, but it does present some real world logistical challenges for them. But I do think Iowa State fans are going to do their best to bring a little Cardinal and gold to the Emerald Isle.
Yeah, coaches like to be in a very good rhythm and routine. They don't like having to get out of that routine, but at least it's the opening game. They have time to recover. And they finally, and I bring this up as a compliment because it never happened, they broke through the double-digit win column. What's it like to now never have to say, are you ever, just even if it's just fans talking crap about never winning 10, they won 11 last year and played for the Big 12 title?
Selfishly, I can stop writing, like, trying to win their first double-digit season for the first time, which I've done, in all 15 years that I've been covering Iowa State. But I do think like that is a real ceiling that they broke through. That was a thing that held over the program, that bothered fans, that bothered the people within the program. And it was kind of an amazing testament, unfortunately for Iowa State, of how poorly, basically the first 80 years of their existence football went. And then you look at the last 10 years, you have an 11-win season last year. They've gone to 2 Big 12 title games, which they had never done before. They win a Fiesta Bowl, which they had never won a New Year's Six bowl game before. And that's all in the last 5 years. So things are going well for Iowa State football, even if some of these milestones are a reminder of how poorly, again, the first few decades went. But I think Iowa State football is riding high right now.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Travis Hines with us, Des Moines Register on the Cyclones and Iowa State football.